Hello and welcome to Wehry Dads. I'm your host, PJ Wehry, with my co-host.
And this is Dad, and today's episode is not brought to you by Readers.com. Readers.com is a phenomenal company that provides great deals on glasses for those of us that are aging. And the reason it's not brought is they don't support us. And I went from 1.5s to 2.0s. Yeah. And I decided to take that jump. Your mom... And now if I put 1.5s on, I can't see a thing. I can't even read this here. I've now trained my eyes. Next week, I'll be doing it on eye patches or something. But Readers.com, they don't support us, but we wish they would.
Yeah, you're going to have to go with Elon Musk's implants. You know, they're starting to do the...
Wow.
Yeah, the whole cybernetic. You're going to go straight ghost in the shell.
Oh, okay. I thought they implanted like electric cars into your eyes. Because that's all I know about Elon Musk. He's been on the moon. Or he sent somebody to the moon. Or he shot something in space.
It's just space. But, you know, I mean, the moon...
Well, there's a space between my ears right now on this subject. So, no, it's all good.
This is a continuation of a 4-part series. We're going to do part 3 today on 7 things that John Wooden's dad wrote in a letter to him and gave him when he graduated elementary school. Is that correct?
I think when he moved off and went to college, but I
got it. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I did not. That was something I saw in passing, and I'm sure John Wooden is the stuff of legend, so there's a lot of folklore around it. So I saw that randomly somewhere. Would not be surprised to find out someone made that up.
I could be wrong, but I think that's what it was.
So past principles: be true to yourself, help others. Those 2 were the first episode.
Yep.
Make each day your masterpiece.
Love that one. My favorite.
Drink deeply of good books, especially the Bible. And that's what we covered in the second episode.
Yeah, both of those are really spectacular.
And we did talk about this, and I find it funny that there are 7 principles per se, but the 7th one definitely feels like 2. So We're going to cover that in a 4th one. But today we're going to talk about make friendship a fine art and build a shelter against a rainy day.
Okay, that's really good, huh?
Yes. I love the make friendship a fine art. The more I've dwelt on that, the more I've liked it. Probably part of that is I've done a lot of work in philosophy of art. So it's amazing how many principles do transfer.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that's interesting is you always create art for an audience. Even if you just create it for your own appreciation, you are your own audience. And most people don't. Most people create it with the idea of someone else seeing it, right? And so, like, you always create with someone else in mind. You know what I mean? Even if it's your future self. But I think with friendship, that's a big deal that you keep the other person in mind, and then how contextual art is, like how you create art and why you create art and what that art ends up being is very dependent on where and how, why it's created, like who it's created for and the time. And I mean, I'm only 33. And even as I look at that, I've had several different friendships and different kinds of friendships depending on context.
Yeah. So I right away go to the very grit of God's word, and, a companion of fools shall be destroyed. So here's his dad saying to him, listen, making friendship's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then he's also, I think, of Proverbs 27 verses 5 and 6, where it says, open rebuke is better than secret love. Faithful, verse 6, are the wounds of a friend. So he said, make sure you have good people around you, because we don't grow by hearing what we want to hear. We grow by people taking us to another level. And then I think it's verse 14 of 27 that says, beware of the guy that rises in the morning blessing. Like, yes. Oh, you're the person that seems like they are your friend, but they're looking for something.
Pure flattery.
Yeah. And so I think all this, and it is a fine art because it's not a science, because you're dealing with different personalities, different personality types, different people, different backgrounds,
different communities.
Yeah. And so I think that's some of the things, like some people say coaching or whatever you do for a living, it's not always a science. There's an art to this. Like, it is fluid, and friendships are fluid. And just people you think sometimes are deep or good friends, you'll find out when open rebuke occurs, or there are wounds that you'll have people that don't want that part of the friendship, but that's what a good friend does. And so, and PJ, as we were getting ready to start this, I thought of this, about that his dad did this.
Yeah.
His dad took the time to do this. His dad thought through what he was doing, and he knew that he wasn't always going to be there. And so it's very, very important as a father to look and say, hey, I'm not going to be there. I'm concerned, or I care about the people that are going to be in your corner, or who you're going to have in a corner. Make sure you are wise in choosing who you put stock in and who you put your confidence in. The importance of, I just think this is phenomenal teaching.
Yes, absolutely. Couple things you mentioned that are really good. You did talk about how friendship is fluid and it changes. Can you think of any times where you had a friend and then they showed up in a different context and that ended up changing your friendship because of the way you saw them in a new light?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be negative. I realize that almost sounds like I'm leading you into that, but
I think we have a tendency with our friends to give them more rope. And what I mean by that is, it's not that we have enemies, but there are people that we are not close to. We are very quick to make a judgment. But when you have a friend, you give them more rope. And I think then what you do is, by giving them more rope, you allow them to make a few mistakes and see how they respond to that, if they'll come back to truth, whatever that may be. I have had some friendships. I've had numerous friendships that have still stayed solid. And there were times we weren't as close, or we may even agree to disagree on something. And that's really a good friendship because,
well, you're never going to agree on everything.
Of course. So, yeah, I mean, if you want specific examples, it would be hard for me to do that. First of all, because I'd have to really gauge one and think through it. And then the other, and I would just hate to slip and say somebody's name.
Yeah, but you want to be tasteful about it.
Yeah, right. But I'm very,
this
very...
one time.
I will tell you this. One of the best things that ever happened to me is when I became a believer when I was 15, I then, and I'm really careful I say this, I got a couple people that were my friends, and there were some previous friends that I kind of separated from. And when I say friends, they were acquaintances. They were guys I hung out with. They weren't friends. They were just concerned about having fun all the time. So now I'm drawing a different level of friend, from a different pool of believers. And when I was in college, high school, my last few years of high school and then college, I met a couple of guys, especially one, and we're still friends to this day. If he was ever to listen to this podcast, he knows exactly who I'm talking about. We still stay in contact, more by text and so forth. We are not, and I'm really careful I say this, needy guys where we have to have that friendship. It's just been there. And there was a time where, and I didn't know this, when I was a junior in high school, I had now been a believer about a year and a half. And he was probably going through some struggles spiritually. And some of the other guys that he was an acquaintance with were going a different direction than I was. At that point, I was like, I'm going to do what God would have me do. And I never judged him for it. And he said to me one time, you stayed my friend even in the midst of that. And I was like, well, that's just what you do. Now that sounds self-effacing. And by the way, when people don't agree with what I do or live a lifestyle contrary to mine, doesn't mean I can't be somebody's friend. Okay. They're just not going to be a good friend. And I think that's the fine art. Like he that hath friends must show himself what? Friendly. That's what Proverbs says. So I'm going to be friendly.
Yeah.
But there is this thing in the inner circle, Peter, James, and John, they're tighter. Did that make sense? Did I just ramble there for a bit?
No, I thought it was good. I even as you're saying that, just to add that you can't have common action without common ground. And so the more common ground you have, the easier it is to work together, right? Like, I mean, if you're constantly disagreeing, even some of like the classic, like, in my YouTube recommendations, I have strange YouTube recommendations, but I get philosophers debating, and people look at that and they're like, they couldn't be more opposite. And I'm like, sort of, but they're both philosophers. They both really value good argumentation and certain ways of speaking. And so what looks like this intense disagreement is actually built on this mutual respect and
I think
common
that's a
set
big
of rules.
thing.
And that this big with friendship. People are like, oh, how could he not be good friends with someone who's really different from him? It's like, it's not that. It's like, there's only so much you can do. You know, if someone's like, man, I really like doing cocaine. I'm like, that's great, but we're probably not going to hang out on Friday night. Like,
No, right. I'm glad to know that. Okay. But I think it's interesting you say it because one of my friends in college basketball is a total opposite of who I am. Right. But he's not total opposite. He's very conservative and he thinks through things and he's going to try to do the right thing. But for what him is right is different than mine. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I really liked about this, I just did an interview with Anna Rubenkamp, who is a master stone cutter in London. And one of the things that she talked about a lot that was what I really took away from what she was talking about, what she creates is gorgeous. She does sculpting in stone. And she does a lot of restoration work, but she also makes statues, and it's unbelievable, right? So when you talk about friendship as a fine art, obviously my mind's going to go there. And she said one of the most frustrating things is that when she talks to people want to romanticize what she does. Like literally she had like this student film crew come in and they're like, so like when you have a breakup, do you like hate carve that person, effigies of that person for like months afterwards? You just keep making their face over and over again? She's like, no, it's like, it's really hard work and really expensive. Like that's, and what people don't realize, like, I mean, especially for what she does, like stone cutting, like if you look up pictures of her, she's normally wearing like a breathing mask.
Sure.
And she's surrounded by dust clouds with power tools. Right. And then she does like the fine work later on. But like most of it is like, it's physically rigorous.
Yeah, it's like grunt work.
And it goes on forever. And even when you look at drawing, like there's like to get to where you need to be, it's like, well, that drawing took you 20 minutes. It's like, no, it took years to be able to do it in 20 minutes. And so when you look at making friendship a fine art, there's that idea of practice and that growth mindset that it's a lot of hard work and you have to constantly be like, I'm going to make friendship a skill. You know,
it is
like,
a skill.
It's something like I am going to think about my friendships. I'm not just going to be like, hey, I go meet this guy and, people float in, they float out of my life. And then you wake up after 20 years and you're like, I don't have any real connections.
So he that have friends must show himself friendly. That's really interesting. And then you just started talking about it from that art standpoint. And then it ties into being a friend is hard work.
Yeah.
It's being there when they are when you are needed. It's being able to step away when you should step away and let them walk through life and not demand their time or a certain process that you think they should follow through on. I think that's really good, PJ. Listen, this is all good. And I think he's saying to his son, this is hard. This is hard work and make an art of it, because the truth is we do need community. And I've heard people say, I hate that word. I'm so sick of hearing community in the church. Right. We need just the Bible. And yes, but
it can be a buzzword. Yeah.
But the Bible is full of community.
Yeah. It's like, well, I mean, fellowship. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to avoid buzzwords, right?
Well, let's go like the disciples. There was a community there. And by the way, some of that community fell off, right? Right.
Yes.
Then you look at Acts chapter 4, the end of that chapter, where it's just, they were in fellowship, they were breaking in bread. As you said, there's this community and they're doing some things that are hard. They're making all things common. This isn't communism. This is, we're going to serve one another. If somebody's got a need, we're going to help them.
Yeah.
We're going to be the church.
Yeah.
That's what the church is supposed to do. So really interesting. And, and by the way, I've encouraged somebody who's looking for friends. I said, listen, one of the best things you can do is join a church, get in a community, people of the like-mindedness and of the same foundation.
Yeah.
So
I just want to, if I could finish this last thought, because I know we need to move on to build the shelter against a rainy day, but something that I've seen you practice, obviously, because then I've also heard you say it explicitly, is you talking about how people are inconvenient. Like you talk about parenting and like, I never want to talk at convenient times. You're like, sometimes you just have to listen even when it's inconvenient. And so even when you're talking, this goes back to what you're saying earlier about being there when people need you. People rarely need you when it's convenient for you.
I'm almost afraid to give this illustration, but this is really probably a good way to put this. So when I worked in Farmington Avenue, I was the youth pastor there, and I worked at the school. Once a week, there was a study hall. I would sit in that study hall and just talk to the kids. It was out in the middle of the area. And I hope he hears this. A good friend of mine, Pastor Mike Keelan, said he would walk by sometimes and be frustrated. It's like, doesn't he have anything better to do?
Yeah.
I'm being really respectful because I understood, and there were things I probably could have been doing. And then he said the year after I left, they would have staff meeting, and Pastor Jones, some of the others would say, what's going on with the kids? I don't know. And he said, Pastor Heelan said, I don't know. I used to know all of it because Coach would know everything because he spent time with kids. And I used to get frustrated watching him do it. But now I recognize that's how he headed things off before they became a problem. Now, I say that not in a bragging way, but people cannot be the inconvenience. Life is about people.
Yeah.
So like if you know people, you can serve them and help them. And it's the same thing. And I'm not sure if that correlates exactly with making it a fine art, but people are a fine art. So I think if you're going to build, and by the way, it's easier as a friend to have open rebuke and faithful ones. In other words, you make the deposits before you make the withdrawals.
Yeah.
You can't go to the bank and take out $100,000 if you only got 1,000 in there.
Yeah.
They're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
I've tried.
Yeah. I was going to say, you can, but then you have to repay with interest.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
Have you ever started off a relationship asking for a favor?
Listen, folks.
I've done that. I've started off relationships asking with a favor. And I always, if you do that, you got to make sure it's like, hey, this is not normal. Let me make it up to you. Because you can't just start off with like, hey, I'd like $100,000, please. That's probably not the best example anyways.
I don't know if it was a bad one. The fact is there's interest. There is a payback.
Yes, absolutely. Next, the next principle before we kind of wrap up this episode, build a shelter against a rainy day. One, I love rainy days. And I think, I like playing out in the rain, but I like coming in from the rain. Something I like to do with my boys. I have memories of you playing out in the rain with me. I don't know if you remember doing that.
No.
In Florida. It's fun to play out in the rain, but only if you're able to go in out of the rain. If you're stuck out in the rain and you can't ever go inside, the best part of a rainy day is laying in your bed and like rolling over in the pillow and being like, I am cozy.
The most miserable thing that you can do if you're camping is get stuck in a tent during a rainy day and you haven't built or dug around a little canal. I remember my dad teaching me that you go and you dig a V canal all the way around and you lead it to the lowest part. You have a drain out there. And I only say that because you don't always have time to do that. We were on an out west mission trip and I remember getting stuck. And it was raining. It wasn't getting in the tent, but the storm was so bad we had to go out and try to secure the tent. Now you're wet and you get back in the tent, and you might even have the ability to get back inside, but it's not a secure place. It's not a place of, what's the term actually right there we're looking at?
Cozy
you're just saying
shelter.
Build that shelter.
Yeah.
Shelter's no good. We actually had to sleep on the bus and it was miserable. It's just miserable. Last night
that was like a tornado or hurricane
was really
weather
a storm,
or something.
Yeah. I didn't want to go deep in that story. And if anybody from that trip is listening, they will smile or they may be laughing. I think last night we had a huge storm come through here in Florida, and around it rained and stormed pretty good. We had a tornado warning. Fortunately, nothing happened, but around 1:00, it really started raining cats and dogs here last night, and I actually went outside just to look at it, and to be able to climb in to a bed and warm up and know that that's going on out there. And people don't prepare. Listen, storms will come.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a reality of life. People don't like that, but storms will come. And if you read the Psalms, David talks about Christ being the cleft of the rock. In other words, a place away from the storms. You better have a shelter. And that would even include, right away my mind goes to, you better be ready, because at any moment things could change, and you better have some preparation for the future, so you have a shelter. Your thoughts, because your mind, I can see, is racing.
No, it's just going along with that. And it's funny, there's so much good in the Bible about that. And what really made that stick in my young brain was reading Jurassic Park.
Okay.
So he talked about chaos theory, and it just like kind of lit my mind up with, one of the weird things that humans do is they just kind of expect things to continue as they are. But one of the truest things about life is that things change. And so we always look at when something big happens and we're like, who could have seen that coming? And it's like, you may not know what the big thing is, but if there's anything we know about life, it's that that something big is going to eventually come that's going to change your life, right? Like, there's going to be, your car's going to break down at some point, or you're like, how could this bad thing happen at this moment? And it's like, bad things are going to happen. Good things are going to happen.
We live in a broken world.
Yeah. Well, but it can also, good things are going to happen. Like,
no question.
We have this idea that like, we just kind of like, we're just going through life on like this steady plane, but really it's a series of peaks and valleys. So when you're
mountains and valleys, that's what David calls it. Like,
we're literally living in, with a great principle from Joseph, right? Like, if I have 7 years of plenty, that's not party time, that's preparation time. That's for the 7 years, the 7 years of famine, right? And that's like, and so one of the things that Becky Sue, and we talk a lot about balance on here. I think that's because it's something that I have been working on a lot. And getting a business off the ground, it takes sacrifice. And one of the things that I've just really struggled with is I've kind of forgotten how to rest. And so one of the things I've just been trying to do is just like, I'm only doing the bare minimum I need to do to keep moving forward. So I can just remember what it's like not to just be busy all the time, because it's not healthy. But that's all part of like, I literally just got used to doing what I was doing. And then finally, like my health was like giving out. I was just tired. Right. And so you like look at this and you're like, well, as long as it keeps going, it keeps going. It's like, it's the same thing with like the housing market in 2008. Like the housing market kept going up, and they were just looking at it and they were like, well, as long as this keeps going, then this whole system will work. And it's like, well, what happens if it dips? Like, well, we didn't think about that.
Well, I think
some guys did, but
this might be really apropos for today, because the way things are going there, the way things are going, whatever it may be, nobody expected gas to go up like it has. But these things are going to occur, especially if there are things that no one 3 years ago expected our economy to take a dip, and it was doing really well. It took a dip because of a very small thing.
Yes.
That nobody can see.
Yeah.
Became the world's biggest challenge, and that's COVID.
Right.
And there was a rainy day, and guys, some people didn't build for a shelter. One of the best things about that is when I had a number of people reach out, hey, are you okay? In regards to support and so forth, because, we're missionaries, the best way to put it. We never took a blip, but our office had talked about how we would handle that, what we would need to do, cut back on, whatever. You've got to be ready for a rainy day. They're going to occur. You got to be ready for challenges. They will come.
Yeah.
And there's just, it's a huge principle that I think is sometimes overlooked.
So you need moments of rest, but also just recognizing there are times to work, right? So I want to be, some people are like, I don't have time to think about the future. I'm hand to mouth, right? And so you always have to be I feel personally, I always want to be very sensitive to the nuances of every person's situation. Some people who are hand to mouth are doing that to themselves because they're always buying the newest of everything. And some people are truly hand to mouth.
Yep.
And you talk to them and you're like, I don't know how you make it, right? So if you're talking about making a shelter on a rainy day, like if you're being chased by a bear, not a good time to stop and make a shelter. Right. If you're, actually what I have written down here is because I just saw this, I think it was in like Finn's work or something like that, the grasshopper and the ant.
Yeah.
if you spend the whole summer singing and not gathering food, which if you know that Aesop's fable,
Yep.
like, and then winter comes and you're like, oh, I don't have any food. That's on you. And so if you're in the midst of a good life, and some of that is just having the wisdom and the self-awareness to be like, I actually have it pretty good here. You know, there's so many people like, man, my life is so tough. And I look at it and I'm like, sorry, not really. Like, you definitely have time to build a shelter.
No
right?
question. So one of the things that I think of right away, if things were to go south for us.
Yeah.
And when I mean that, like, your business might not do as well.
Sure.
Something would change with nations of coaches.
Sure.
We would have to take a less of a salary, whatever. We both could make it.
Yeah.
We made this decision to.
That's part of the reason
together.
we made this decision.
Right. Like, and we would have a shelter for a rainy day. And that's very, folks, for out there, we're not telling you that's what you ought to do, but that's very comforting and securing. One of the guys I just got off the phone with has done extremely well financially. And here's the crazy thing, folks. He's lived in the same house for 30 years. I am telling you, he lives in the Orlando area. He could have bought something on water.
Yeah.
He could have spent, he probably easily could have bought a $2 million house.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I wouldn't ask him that, but he's got a nice home with a pool, but for 30 years, he stayed in the same house.
Yeah.
Because he invested in something other than that. He invested in people. And so he's made friendship a fine art.
Yeah.
And he's built for a shelter for a rainy day. So really good.
Awesome. Any last thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, folks, I want you all to know that we care. And I don't want you to think we're sitting in judgment. And obviously the crazy thing is these are not scripture, aka chapter and verse. There's so many truths here that I think you can grab onto and take it to scripture, aka friendship, open rebuke, secret love, faithful to wounds of friends. And then, all throughout the scripture, the greatest shelter we have is Christ, our solid rock. And it is a serious gifting that we've been given, that we have a foundation and a shelter all in one. So that'd be my encouragement.
And it's a great one, especially, if you're listening today and we helped you take one more step on your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Please like, share, subscribe so somebody else can take that step too. I mean, that's our goal. I love that you put it that way, is that we're not here to really judge or condemn. I know some things we might say might hurt, but that's because we're doing our best to be an encouragement.
Speak the truth.
Yeah. And to help.
Click the button. Click the button. Hey, have a great day. Thank you so much. Love you, PJ.
Love you.